Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Golick. I'm the Health and Wellbeing Consultant here at Bellin Health, and I want to welcome you to another segment of our Mental Health Moments series. So thanks for taking some time out today to join us. We're in air conditioning, so we're nice and comfy in here, and I hope all of you are as well. So this month, our Lifesaver Wellbeing series took a spin at looking at financial well-being this month. And so our topic was smart money. And so I am pleased to have a special guest with us today that's going to help us talk a little bit about money and the impact that it has on us and our lives. So I'd like to introduce Patrick Nate. He is a Business Development Officer for the Bank at Work program with Associated Bank. So welcome, Patrick. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time. And as always, we have our fabulous behavior health therapist, Charles Latour, with us to help us wrap our heads around how this impacts us in terms of mental health. How are things with you today, Charles?
Pretty good. Thanks, Linda. How about you?
I'm good. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic. Because to be honest, I think it's something that everyone can relate to. We all have money per se. We all probably think we need more money than what we have. And certainly money has been known to cause stressors with people. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into this topic today. So I want to build a little bit of awareness around this. So Charles, I'd like to start with you and just talk a little bit about the impact that finances can have on our mental health. What have you seen? What do you notice about people experiencing those types of stressors?
Sure. When it comes to mental health and financial, it's really incredible because when a family or an individual is going through financial stress, especially if there's been a major incident that happened, it's probably one of the most unavoidable type of mental health issues that you can have because of bills that come around, mortgages. Things can change really fast, really dramatically if you are in the midst of a financial disaster of some kind. And even if it isn't disastrous, it could still be really impactful. And I'll give you a couple of the mental health issues that come up is what kids can our schools can our kids go to? Can we afford these groceries? Can we afford these medicines? And can we buy this? Can we afford that? Those sorts of things. So the reason it's really impactful is when something's going on financial, it is ever present. It's in your sleep, it's in your day, it's in your inability to sleep. It creates more anxiety. It creates possible depression. And the other thing that it does is it can create a lot of family conflict. Is, well, why did you spend that? Well, that's because you bought money, you spent money that. You didn't have to buy that. Well, I did have to buy that. So it can lead to really intense and frequent arguments within the family, either parents to children or parents to each other. And even from there, a lot of finger pointing, restlessness, animosity about these things. So there's a lot of different ways. It's incredibly impactful, and it can go to that place really, really quickly. So I'll pause there, but suffice it to say, the impact that it can have on our overall emotional and physical well-being is incredible.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. Just something you said made me remember that in my household when I was growing up, my mom was the saver and my dad was the spender. And I remember many conversations surrounding those types of things. So that really hit home for me. So Patrick, this is obviously your world. This is where you live, helping people financially. So what have you noticed about the folks that you try to help and how that connects to their emotional state as they're trying to figure out their finances?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Charles hit it on the head that this is something that can domino quickly. And, those are all the side effects that we have. But, the reality of the situation is it affects everybody. Some of the statistics that came out recently, 73% of Americans rank their finances as the most significant stress in their life. So when that's the case, part of what I do at Associated Bank is teach financial wellness to employees of businesses locally across the state, and that resounds. That statistic resounds with everybody that I talk to, and like Charles said, it affects everybody, right? So the stresses we have at work, if that's financial stress, comes home, and then it just dominoes from there. So, I see that as a blessing. I love the role I have to be able to teach those things and give best practices that way.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that so much. So let's talk about, I guess, kind of what you all have seen recently. I think we're definitely coming out of a year where people were impacted financially. And what have you seen? And I guess also, what are the hopeful things that you're seeing in terms of how people are starting to manage maybe some of the changes that they've seen? So Charles, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, great way to look at this. And I want to even dovetail with a very important thing Patrick identified, which is because I've seen similar statistics, and the American Psychological Journal had published this as anywhere like 72%, as Patrick said, have this. And here's what I want to emphasize. This was before COVID-19. It isn't just, we haven't had this financial stress since COVID-19. It's just accentuated it for a lot of people. But this has been there. Spending habits. I always like to use the phrase, first we form our habits, then our habits form us. What are our habits around money? What are our habits around spending? What are the things that we do with it? So it isn't like, as we can all imagine, none of this started because of COVID. It's just been amplified exponentially. And some of the things that I've seen since then is, and how it's frustrating, is two people running a household, loved what they're doing, bringing home money, living at a very comfortable level, and what they've accustomed to and what they've worked hard for. And then COVID hits, and one or the other or both no longer has that livelihood. So what they've worked hard for, the nest egg they've set aside, all the planning that they've done, this considered approach to life, to managing things as well as they can through no fault of their own, it seems like now it's all gone. And now they are in a totally different place. So not only don't they any longer have the nest egg that they had set aside, they're still finding it hard to find work. And then the adjustments that come from that, from the family, what the kids can do and what they may not, depending on the age of the children, they're just accustomed to what they were having. And then this can become problematic for them to make the adjustments as well. So all of this is difficult. And one other thing that has amazed me, I saw this statistic a while back, and there's some debate on it still, but even with all the hard work that people do, there is estimated that anywhere between 4 out of 10 and 6 out of 10 don't have enough resources set aside to cover in cash a $400 expense. That 4 out of 10 probably can't do that, come up with that money like that, or they'd have to put it on a credit card. I mean, that's the state of kind of where we are. There's one other amazing thing in that it changes sometimes medically, that a lot of different research you may look at, medical expenses are either number one or number two causes of bankruptcy in our country. So there's a lot of financial stressors that can come from many different ways. And it seems like the more we have, the more complicated our life can be.
Absolutely, and it's very real, and I'm sure particularly it's been real for people that maybe have had some medical issues, within this past year. Patrick, what are your thoughts? What have you seen?
So yeah, I think you really nailed it, Charles, when you said that this wasn't a problem. Financial wellness and stressors weren't. It wasn't that they weren't a problem before COVID and everything that's gone on the last year and a half, but that definitely exacerbated it, right? So what I'm hoping, and a lot of the articles I've read recently are hoping that this can be something like a catalyst to really get people to see the need for financial wellness. And I think some of the statistics we've gone over so far show that it is a stressor, and I think people are realizing it, but that we can start taking the steps necessary to get in a place where when the next thing happens, right? So we all hope it's not a pandemic, but 2008 was a housing crisis and stock market crashes and ups and downs, and right. So there's always something that's going to come, and we may not know about it. Maybe a medical procedure, something that's going to come up and be a challenge financially. And if we have those best practices in place and we have those habits, like Charles mentioned, we have those habits in place, we can be as prepared as possible for that, so we don't find ourselves on the wrong side of it, right? So I think that's my hope on what coming out of this. And again, I think the statistics show that this is a real issue. People are realizing it, and so now we need to get to the point where people seek out that help and seek out the resources that are available to get themselves prepared for whatever comes next.
Well, and I know it's also a problem just even locally, because even some of the surveys that we've done locally, financial well-being is one of the top things that employers are really concerned with in terms of educating their workforce. So I know it's needed. I know people are really looking for it. So let's move to what people can do. Like I said in the beginning, I think everybody thinks, oh, I just need more money and then everything will be okay. And no, that's not the answer. So let's get to some of the answers. Where can people help themselves? What are some action steps they can do? What do they need to be aware of? Charles, what do you tell people when they have a lot of financial stress going on? Where do you start with them?
Yeah, so let me answer this question kind of in two parts. The first one, I want to blend a little bit with what Patrick was saying, because there's something really important there. He had mentioned that, as I had said, this isn't new, it's just different. It's just sped up for a lot of people. But to look at it in what I describe as forcing functions, there's certain things in life that become forcing functions for us. Sometimes it's a housing crisis, or a medical crisis, or an academic crisis, a family crisis. To see this as not necessarily as bad, but something similar to what we've talked about before. How do you grow through things? What do you learn through things? How do you get better? That see this psychologically as a time to get better. Maybe I wasn't spending the way that I wanted to. Maybe I wasn't saving the way that I wanted to. So can I start to see this as a forcing function psychologically to say, even if we did okay with it, okay, this didn't happen, but boy, is this a wake-up call. Does this give me an opportunity to wake up, create a psychological forcing function to maybe save the way that I would like to? Because maybe I'm not where I want to be at whatever age I am that we experience this COVID pandemic. That now what wake-up call does it create for me to do what I would like to do? So first of all is seeing it that way. The second part is taking stock. I think there's like a couple different ways that I've worked with people, particularly as couples, to be analytical about what they do and what's their philosophy around money. So you had mentioned it even in your family of origin, kind of growing up. There's sometimes a spender and a saver. And are they working together, or are they constantly working against each other? So the personality types, there's a couple ways that you look at them. There's the saveaholic, there's the shopaholic, there is the person who ultimately is just the stasher, is another nickname for it. Maybe not saving money the way they need to in an investment fund, hopefully things that Patrick can talk about more. But the behaviors, I'm always trying to squirrel away some money and what I'm doing with that, and where we are with that, being honest, knowing yourself, getting feedback on yourself, having some alignment of where you are and where you want to be, and an honest appraisal, and then committing to it moving forward. And oftentimes, those psychological components then lead to, okay, if this is what you want to do, this is what you feel is important to you, and you're making this commitment, talk with someone like Patrick on how you make sure you get there. Because a person like him, he has the resources and the mechanisms and the strategies. Now that you know behaviorally what you want to do, this is now an opportunity for you to do that, and someone who could lay out a pathway for you to get from current state to ideal state, and then a referral to someone like Patrick.
Beautiful. So what are your thoughts, Patrick? Where do people start? How do they begin? I think really in our nation, we have a lot of people that are in a lot of credit card debt and maybe some of those types of things. I think we're a society that keeps up with the Joneses, like I need a bigger car, I need a bigger house, I need I need everything. And where do people start?
Yeah, so I think Charles just made a great point, and I actually found some statistics on it. So when you find yourself going into debt, right? When you find yourself at that tipping point, get help right away, right? So reach out to somebody. There's a number of free options you can go to get help on that. One of the statistics that I found was 3 in 4 respondents to this particular survey said they're not going to seek help. 75% of people that are going into debt are not going to look for help. So that's a big one. Right away, when you start seeing the need, address it. Reach out, get some free help. And I like a 3-step approach, right? Pragmatically, what can we do? What are some takeaways that we can have? So every financial literacy class I have, whether it's debt reduction, how to build a credit score, all of them begin with budgeting. All of them begin with putting a spending plan together in place and agreeing on it. So like Charles mentioned, if this is a family, if you're part of a family, it's getting agreement from everybody that this is our spending plan going forward. And the more that we can get input from all members of the family, the better it's going to be sticking to that spending plan. So putting something that's real and in place is step number 1. Step number 2, Charles had mentioned it as well, is building an emergency savings plan. So I like to think of things in a bit of a psychological way. So I want to, in my advice is race to 1,000. So set your first goal at saving $1,000. Now, whether that takes you 6 months, whether it takes you 3 months, however long that is, that's your first goal, because you get an emotional win by seeing that bank account have $1,000 in it. Ideally, once we get to that, the goal then is to get to 3 to 6 months of our expenses. So whatever we total that up, we already know what that number is because we've created a spending plan and we see what the outgoing bills are. So now we save up 3 to 6 months of that. So that's our emergency savings. And like Charles said, if the worst happens, if we go through again where there's something that shuts down the economy and we lose our jobs, we've got 3 to 6 months in place to figure out what happens next. So that's really step number 2, getting that put together. And step number 3 then is creating a plan to get out of debt. So once we have the budget in place, once we have our 3 to 6 months of expenses in place, now we start attacking the debt that we have. Like you mentioned, Linda, credit card debt is through the roof. Student loan debt, automobile. I mean, you name it. We're an economy. We're a country of debt. One of my favorite authors always said, "We spend money we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't even like." Right. So this is something where if we can get those things under control, move away from the debt culture. Think of what you could do or how free you would be without having a mortgage and a car payment every month, right? So think of all the expenses that go into that. Now put yourself in a spot where the bad times come, right? Something happens where we're shut down, but we don't have to worry about making that mortgage payment. We don't have to worry about making those automobile payments or student loan, whatever that is. That's all gone, and the freedom and the lack of stress you have from that. So that would really be my 3-point approach. That's what we always recommend, my peers and I, when we do this. So creating a spending plan, building the emergency fund, and then really doing everything we can to move out of debt and gain that freedom.
And I love when you talk about that, Patrick, because to me, I just right away think about truly the impact on well-being. Like the feeling of freedom and not being tied down and worrying all the time because you're not sure how you're going to make your credit card payments. I mean, think of the impact that has on our health. Think about how we're going to sleep better. We're going to be in a better mood to those that are around us. There's just such an effect on our well-being when we get our finances in order, and that's truly why we're talking about it today. So I do want to open it up for questions, and I do have a couple comments and questions coming in, so please keep typing those in. We'd love to get your questions. So Elizabeth has said, I think it's important that if one family member is doing the bills, they really need to sit down with the other person to show them where the money is going, as I know people are having fights with the other person is saying, I work, and yet there's never any money, which can cause fights. Charles, I would imagine you have probably seen that in your time.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and there's a really interesting component to that, and the psychological thing of getting to 1,000 and then getting beyond 1,000. When you could focus on what you're building, you're in a psychologically stronger place. And anything that nudges us in that direction is helpful too. So if we could see family members as a nudge, and I'm going to recommend if anybody's read this book called Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. They're two guys. Cass Sunstein was at University of Chicago at the time of the writing, is now at Harvard, and Richard Thaler was at still at University of Chicago, won the Nobel Prize for this work. But it's that these nudges that get us going in the right direction rather than in the wrong direction. And these family nudges can do that. So just getting people on board that this is what we're doing, and as Elizabeth is saying, partner to partner. Otherwise, what it creates is kind of that Greek mythology Sisyphus effect where we just keep trying to climb up, but then we go down. We climb up and go down, and it can get pretty disheartening and disappointing and disillusioning and say, why am I doing all of this? But when we have the focus on what we need to do, and we are doing it, and that climb to 1,000, we could see it going, get motivated around that, and then keep going from there, set new goals. We have a more virtuous upward spiral effect, and we feel more positive about what we're doing psychologically, and we're working together on it rather than at cross purposes. So I think all of those things are really, really important, and it comes down to the relationship and communication and then commitment to make it happen.
Perfect. Patrick, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, one thing I would like to, say to Elizabeth there is that definitely can cause conflict, right? So one recommendation I have, and I follow this best practice as well, is writing everything down. So whether that's in a journal, whether that's on a spreadsheet, I like use Excel, so I put together a spreadsheet of all of our outgoing bills, all of our income. But that's agreed upon, right? So that is my wife and I sitting down. My kids are young yet, so they don't have much input, but as they get older, that's important that we bring them into it too. They're 16, 17, 18 years old. When they get to that age, that we're bringing them into those discussions as well, but making sure something's on paper, something's, that both of you can look at and say, here's what we talked about, here's what we agreed upon. Now the money's going somewhere else, writing everything down to see where it's going, getting back on track, and getting that spending plan and control for both of you, I think is important.
Awesome. Deborah actually submitted a question to Patrick. It says, Patrick, do you see people more open to that $1,000 emergency fund for themselves as a lesson learned from COVID? Are you seeing that?
We're seeing that, I think, again, universally, I think people are more willing to listen now and more willing to focus on the financial health that they have as a family. And that is a great first step. It's important to begin that process where you are, though. So if $1,000 seems like a big goal, make it 100 and then make it 1,000, right? So like Charles mentioned, setting these goals and then continuing to progress towards them. $1,000 for somebody who's been laid off for months is a big number, right? So making that goal reasonable, but making it something that you can attain and really strive for. And, like Charles had mentioned, the nudge theory, there are so many applications of that in technology and just everyday life. So I know we had talked about, 401k nudges, things like that. But there are simple applications that you can find out there. I know one I see ads for all the time is Acorns, but what it does is it rounds up the number you're charged. So if you pay $6.10 at the gas station, it'll round up 90 cents, put that into a savings account for you. So you're beginning this process, but you're saving without even realizing it. So that's something we hope to continue to see after people get, I hate to say back to normal, but as everything moves back, that people still keep that in mind and are still striving for having those emergency funds, getting out of debt, and keeping that momentum going as time goes on.
Well, we have to think about it in a different way too. I was lucky enough to have an aunt when I had my first job out of college, and she was a financial planner, and she came to me and she was like, "Okay, it's time to start saving." And I was like, "What? I have a car payment, I have student loan debt, I'm paying rent on an apartment." And she gave me this thought of, you have to pay yourself first. You have to pay yourself first. And that has really stuck with me. So, back when I was 23 years old, maybe it was a smaller amount, but it was still making that on the priority list to start building something. So that was, I'll be forever grateful that she told me that at such a young age. That was really important. And I think, both of you, if you could speak to the idea of where do people go to get education on their finances? Because if you don't come from a family that educated you and taught you how to balance your accounts or anything like that, where can people start? Where can they learn? Charles, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, let me do two things with that, if you don't mind, Linda. And one of them, I'm going to actually defer this to Patrick, but there's two things I want to say, even leading up to this and tying in something you had said earlier and Patrick did, and even how it relates to one of the questions. That we create nudges, right? Hopefully, but nudges are also being created for us. As we had said, the 401k 10, 15, 20 years ago, 401k was, do you want to do it or not? And the easiest thing, and maybe this is the first part of the answer to your question, the easiest thing to not do is to go past inertia. Inertia keeps us in a place. And if we have to open it, we may not. So one of the nudges most employers went to in their benefits package was anybody who works their first day of work, they're automatically enrolled in a 3% savings of 401k, which is maybe a really good thing, because at the very least, even if they didn't save anything, they would have broke even by not paying the taxes. And they would have had no more money if they didn't automatically enroll. So that's a 401k, that really cool nudge. There's nudges coming at us in different ways, though. And the most amazing nudge is in this regard. And I think this is one of the things, other than the natural things that can happen to us through no fault of our own. And I want to highlight those and then the other one. So the no fault of our own, something medical, something tragic, some event that we couldn't control. So one stigma out there about debt and financial issues is you're either good about money or you're bad about money. But I've seen in the last 5 years, and really in the last 18 months, there's people good with money that don't have it, right? It isn't just about you're either good or you're not, or you did really good or you really screwed up. This isn't all choice, and we can't look at people in a more negative way just if they're struggling financially, because in many respects, it does not have to be any fault of their own. So that's one part. The other one is that we are up against a big, big machine, and that is the Madison Avenue machine, which is every time you turn on your computer and anywhere you go and anything you do, it is being sifted and sorted out for you. I'll give you one example. I recently sent a friend of mine a song that came on my YouTube. And the person said, oh my gosh, how did you come up with this? I can't believe it. This is so great. I said, it just popped up first on my YouTube, and it made me think, why did that come up? I had nothing to do with that. It knew me. And there's a documentary called The Social Dilemma, which is all about how your computer and your phone know you. So we are all dealing with the constant bombardment of something that's been psychologically set up to know you and your spending habits, and maybe even how much you have to spend. And we're always coming up on that. So one of the things I'm helping people do in understanding that is understanding where they are in relationship to that machine, understanding how much that is dominating them, or are they managing themselves? Where's the regulation coming from? Your external devices or what you really need, and making decisions like that. Otherwise, that temptation, it's constant and it's a battle, and we have to work through it. And then again, getting to people like Patrick to, once you're there, to what you have to do with the money you already have to invest wisely enough to get to where you want to get to, regardless of your starting point. So with that, I'll defer the rest of it to Patrick.
Yeah, you made some great points there. One I wrote down is that really, again, as a culture, we're driven to spend, and we're driven to keep up with the Joneses, and that's what we see on TV. That's what we see, on YouTube clips. As I'm just watching my own videos, ads pop up for things that I need to buy to keep up with everybody. So another quote that I've tried to live by, and that I really like is, we want to right now live like no one else. So we make sure we stick to our budget. We pay off the debts. We do everything we can. So we don't necessarily keep up with the Joneses now. We're living like nobody, so that later on we can live like no one else. So that later on we have the freedom to spend how we want, to give how we want, to donate, whatever that looks like. We have that freedom later on. So in the stats here, Barb, or I'm sorry, in stats in the chat, Barb wrote a great point. One thing I started doing decades ago is if I get a raise, I put it in a savings of some sort, so that way I'm not spending it. This is fantastic. So typically you're going to be on a yearly review basis, and at some point you'll get an incentive, a raise, right? So we spend into the money that we get in. So we start spending above what's coming in. And again, that's something that's pushed on us. That's how commercialism works, right? So if we can do that simple stat right there of what Barb said, start putting that aside, saving that for a rainy day, doing what you need to build up the emergency, pay down debt. What a fantastic way to get in a great financial wellness spot. But you had mentioned, what else can we do, right? So like I said before, get help early. Part of what I do for Associated Bank is at no cost to the employers, to the employees that are seeing me. We teach these financial literacy sessions. We have online sessions where we do virtual learning, live and recorded, so you can watch it on your own time. But really seeking out that help from where you can. There are a number of places where you can get this information free. So I encourage you to do that. Go ahead and get the resources from wherever you can, and then start doing what works best for you, right? So finding out what's going to be the best plan for you to attack this and get on the right side of debt, and then go from there. So like I say, I would love to help anybody out who's on this call, and feel free to reach out to me. We can get you at it, but then also, again, there's people in your communities as well that can help out too.
And we will definitely send Patrick's info out with the recording, so everyone will have that and can reach out to him. So as you were speaking, both of you, Patrick and Charles, I just thought of this kind of always equates to it takes practice. A lot of the things that we talk about on these calls, it isn't something that maybe we're going to change overnight. But the more that we work on it, the more we build that muscle. So here we're going to build our financial muscle. And the more little steps we take, the easier it will become, and the more impact that we'll see. So even just to start somewhere, right, just to do something. And I think even just building an awareness around it, and just asking ourselves, well, where do I spend, or where is my money going that maybe it doesn't need to go? I mean, I think of myself walking through Target sometimes, and I buy a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't even know that I needed, but I see it and I buy it. So sometimes if we can ask ourselves those questions too. If anybody else has questions for Patrick or Charles, please type those in. As we're waiting for some questions to come in, I'll just kind of ask for your closing thoughts. So, Charles, final thoughts today.
Yeah, a couple, and even with what you're just saying, my final thought would be Steve Jobs had a saying, which was, I don't want to be the richest man in the cemetery, right? So he was all about meaning, searching meaning, finding meaning. Usually the meaning that we have is not going to get found in what we spent, right? But I had seen this other quote, which was, it was a takeoff on the Beatles song, Money Can't Buy You Love, or Money Can't Buy You Happiness. But underneath it, the caption was, but I'd love to die trying. Like, give me as much. But Daniel Kahneman says this, money can't buy you happiness, but the lack of it can certainly buy you misery. So we know from statistics, after a certain amount of income, we are no happier. We're only more comfortable. And even then, I have to say, I have had the pleasure and fortune to know incredibly, amazingly wealthy people who seemed like they were the most unhappy people that you could meet. And I've known many, many people with not a lot of wealth who were the most remarkably happy and content people that I've ever met. So what I'm saying in that is this life is more about meaning than accumulating things. Our wealth isn't just for happiness. It's about this idea that it keeps us protected and or safe from some things that may happen to us, and it's buying comfort but never happiness. So we're doing these things for our well-being, and usually when we're spending this, it's in the service against our well-being. So when we know ourselves well enough and have that honest self-awareness and appraisal, we are taking ourselves in a better direction and on the road not only to better financial wellness, but overall emotional well-being and wellness. So, and that's what I think it all comes down to.
Really agree with you, Charles. I think, sometimes we're chasing the wrong things, and we really need to ask ourselves what is the most important and what really brings us true happiness.
Now, let me say one last thing on that, Linda, if I may. In that chasing, it's one other factor. I was talking a little bit about the digital machine and the pop-ups that encourage us to buy stuff. The social media is doing the same thing. And there's one other comment I want to make on it, is the social media in the Snapchats, the Instagrams, the Facebook, number of others. It is that, I call it the perpetuated keeping up with the Kardashians effect. We always want to see what someone else posted, and then I'm going to post something better. And as a result, we keep upping that and going in the wrong direction because we never get true happiness in that. We just get more social comparison, which actually psychologically makes us more uncomfortable. But the other thing I wanted to say with it, from an overall standpoint, is this idea that the less we're comparing, the happier we are, and the more content we are with what we have, the more happy we are as well. So not focusing on what we don't have, but focusing on what we do is our pathway to truest happiness. And usually that comes not from things, but people and relationships and finding meaning. And when we're focusing on that, psychologically, physically, we're in a better place.
I love that, Charles. Absolutely love that. I think that's such a great thought to really center all of us in how we live and how we choose to exist. Fantastic. Patrick, what are your closing thoughts today?
Yeah, that was a great quote. It reminded me of kind of something we talked about earlier, right? So don't let pride get in the way of seeking out that help, right? So I know, again, we talked about it, social media, the commercialization, everything really pushes us to try to one up the people around us. So we find ourselves in those spots where now we're far deeper in debt than we can imagine. We don't know what to do to get out, but we don't want to ask for help because we're too proud. And this is something that will just continue stacking on top of each other. It's a domino effect as it just keeps rolling. So don't let pride get in the way. Admit that we maybe don't know what to do to get out of it, right? So I mean, we mentioned it before. We don't know what we don't know. So there's many best practices out there. Putting a spending plan together. If that's something new to you, that's your first step. That's the first step to take. And I think you said it before too, that I teach this for a living. I'll give it one quick example. I teach this for a living, right? So this is what I do, teaching all these classes over the last couple of years. And I found myself with a spending plan that was lopsided. So there was more going out, or I didn't have enough when certain bills were due, and I couldn't figure out why. So what I did is, again, I looked everything over. I sat down with my wife. We talked through everything and realized that certain bills were all coming bunched together, right? So we would be spending too much in the early part of the month that there wasn't enough left at the end. So I went and created another checking account for my utility bill and my electric, right? So now that those funds, right, I'm nudging myself. I created this so that they're automatically coming out at certain times. So that money's not there for me to spend. But again, it's little things like that you may not know you have access to, may not know have these tips and tricks in place to get out of that and to begin that process to the true financial wellness or the true freedom that comes with that. So yeah, that would be my thing, is really set the pride aside if you can, and really seek out the help that's there for you to help get you on the right path.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Really great information today. I hope that all of you enjoyed it as much as I did. I feel like we really learned a lot today, and we can take this forward and really hopefully make some tweaks and changes to bring us a little bit closer to a really great financial well-being. So I don't see any additional questions. So with that, thank you to both of you for your time today. Patrick, we really enjoyed having you as our special guest today. And we'll definitely be sending out Patrick's information so you can get in touch with him. And Charles, again, thank you so much for helping us frame it from that psychological perspective. I think that is just so helpful. And with that, we'll wrap up today, and I hope the rest of you have an awesome day. Take care.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great day.